Hi, Introstat students. So today we are going to do another exercise in the last unit, Unit 12, on significance test, also known as hypothesis testing. All right, so to close this. So we're going to do type 1 and type 2 error, right? Type 1 and type 2 error. So perhaps this is a good time to kind of explain a little bit. All right, so what is type 1? So let's say our null hypothesis, that Mr. Su is not guilty. Okay, right? That's how when if I'm standing on trial, right? They usually don't say Mr. Su is innocent. No, they just say Mr. Su is not guilty because there isn't sufficient evidence to say otherwise. So the alternate hypothesis is that Mr. Su is guilty, right? Is guilty. Okay, so um, yeah. Now, type 1 error is this. Type 1 error, right, is when you reject H naught when H naught is true. So think about this. You reject H naught. So you're rejecting that Mr. Su is not guilty. In other words, you're saying that he is guilty, right? But in fact, he is really, really innocent. He's not guilty, but you say that he is guilty, and then you send him to jail. So what is the consequence of that, right? When you reject H naught, when H naught is actually true, this is considered a type 1 error. And this, the consequence is you're sending an innocent man to jail, right? You're sending, right? Sending an innocent man, okay, man to jail. Now, to some people, that is a bad thing, right? Then you put Mr. Su in there. That's not too cool. So, right, you're sending an innocent man to jail. Now, how about type 2 error? Type 2 error. Type 2 error is that you fail, right? You fail to reject H naught when H naught is false. Okay? So you're saying that Mr. Su is indeed guilty, but you did not reject H naught. So Mr. Su get to walk free. So you're letting a guilty man, right? Uh, you're letting a guilt, guilty man walk free. So now, of the two, which one in this scenario would you think it's the worst? Sending an innocent man to jail, right? Committing a type 1 error, or committing a type 2 error, or letting a guilty man walk free. So, of the two, which one would you like to prevent? Would you like to prevent making type 1 error, or would you like to prevent making type 2 error? So, in this exercise, this sometimes it's up to the individual, right? There's no right or wrong here. So here, to some people, they might think, you know what, sending an innocent man to jail, you are essentially ruining a life, right? And type two is that you let a guilty man go, and maybe that guilty person, his conscience will get the better of him, and he will regret and then become a better person. I don't know, but the idea is this is what type one and type two error is. So let's go dive in. Regulations from the Environmental Protection Agency say that soil used in play areas should not have lead levels. uh, that exceeds a 400 parts per million ppm. Before beginning construction at a new site, an agent will take a sample of the soil and run a significance test on the mean lead level in the soil. If the mean lead level in the sample is significantly higher than 400 ppm, then the soil is deemed unsafe and the construction cannot continue. Here are the hypotheses for this test. So we are assuming that in the soil that it has less than 400 ppm, all right, which means the soil is safe. The alternative hypothesis is that it's greater than 400 and the soil is unsafe. Okay, so usually we don't put less than or equals to, because we could have easily said this. We could have easily said the mean is 400 ppm, right? So, but then in this case, it's written the hypothesis is the mean is less than or equals to 400 ppm. So you could have easily written this, and this would still be correct. So, where mu, sorry, this is actually the symbol mu, right, which means it's population mean, is the mean lead level in the soil at the new site. Okay, so what would be the consequence of type 2 error, right? Of type 2 error. Now, type 2 is what? Type 2 is that you fail to reject H naught when H naught is false. So H naught is not, so you're saying that the mean is not less than, you found evidence saying that is not less than 400. In fact, it is greater than 400. But we failed to reject it. We failed to reject H naught. We failed to say that the soil is safe. So the consequence of that is that the construction will continue when the soil is unsafe. Okay? So, next question. Donated blood is tested for infectious diseases and other contaminants. Since most donated blood is safe, right? Most donated blood is safe. It saves time and money to test batches of donated blood rather than test individual samples. It's hard and it's very time consuming and very money consuming to test all of it. So they rather just test batches of it. A certain test is performed to see if a certain toxin is present, and the entire batch is discarded if the toxin is detected. This is similar to using a null and an alternative hypothesis to determine whether to discard or keep the batch. The hypothesis being tested could be stated as H naught. The null hypothesis is that the batch does not contain the toxin, right? So the batch is safe. The alternate hypothesis is that the batch contains the toxin. So, what would be the consequence of a type 1 error? So, type 1 is what? Type 1 is you reject H naught when H naught is actually true. So the batch is actually true. It does not contain the toxin, but you reject it, right? You reject it, and once you reject it, you're saying that the batch does contain the toxin when it's not true, and therefore you throw away. What do we do? They say that the entire batch is discarded. So the batch is discarded when it actually doesn't contain the toxin, right? So I hope this helped make sense between type 1 and type 2 error. You just have to look at the context. So if you have any questions, you let me know. Thank you very much.